you want, or save yourself the trouble and just follow along. The basis of the talk is the 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the divine and demonic natures, mostly devoted to the demonic in the original chapter. It was a chapter that for many years I thought of as being a little bit, well, of course, true, because it's spoken by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, but it's turned up just a little bit too high, isn't it? Seems just a little bit pinching. Hare Krishna. Is that okay? Yeah, without the pinch. It was a chapter I thought of as being true, of course, but a little, perhaps, hyperbolic or overstated, perhaps, because we think of demons in our typical ISKCON drama fashion, or Bollywood Mahabharata fashion. You know, demons are going, ha 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 ha, whoa, ho, ho, ho. And, it just seems a little bit much. People are more complex than that. So I sort of had this, not exactly, but a kind of feeling that this is a little much, this chapter. After the events of 9/11, I felt I took a different view, which was that if anything, Krishna was understating the case. And maybe we'll talk more about that as we go. In the beginning, Krishna speaks of the divine qualities, Ahayam Sattva Sangshutir Jnana Yoga Vyavastiti Dhanam Tamas Triyagyascha Svadhyaya Stapa Arjava Ahimsa Satyama Krodhas Tyaga Shantira Paishanam Daya Bhutesh Vilodutvam Mardavam Vira Chapalam Tejakshaman Vitir Daksham Adroho Nat Manita Bhavanti Sampadam Daini Abhijatosi Pandava. Now, my dear Arjuna, these are the divine qualities: fearlessness, purification of one's existence, sattva sangshuti, cultivation of spiritual knowledge, charity, self-control, sacrifice, study of scriptural wisdom, austerity, straightforwardness, non-violence, truthfulness, freedom from anger, renunciation, tranquility, aversion to fault-finding, compassion for all living beings, daya bhuteshu, freedom from greed, gentleness, modesty, steady determination, vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, cleanliness, freedom from envy, freedom from the passion for anger, for honor. Bhavanti Sampadam Daivim. These are the divine qualities, divine assets. And then there are the demonic. Let's see. Darpo, Darpo, Vimanascha, Krodha, Parusha, Medacha, Agyanam, Javijatasya, Partha, Sampadam, Asuri. Pride, anger, arrogance, conceit, harshness, ignorance. These are the demonic qualities. And Krishna assures Arjuna, my dear Arjuna, you don't have to worry, you're born with the divine qualities. But dvabhuta sarva lokesmin daivasura evacha. There's two kinds of natures, the divine nature and the demonic nature. Pravrittim cha nivrittim cha janav vidirasuraha nashocham navichacha lo nasatyam teshu vidyate. Is there some water? Maybe there is, I don't see it.
Just want to
Mm-hmm.
just want to get some.
It's gone to get some, okay. Pravrittim cha nivrittim. The demonic don't know what is to be done and what is not to be done. Nashocham, they're Nashocham napi chacharo, nashocham teshu vidyate. In those people, you're not going to find cleanliness or proper behavior or truthfulness. They're liars, they're filthy, they're nasty in their behavior. Atma, let's see. This is 9, Atma, Sambhava. No. Etam drishtim avashtabhya nashtatman olapudriya prabhavanti ugra karmana akshayaya jaritovita. They think that everything is just born from matter, that there's nothing more than matter, there is no spirit. Everything is just an interaction of chemicals, and there's no God in control of anything. So, in this way, etam drishtim avashtabhya, they're lost to themselves, they're alpabhuti, they're small in intelligence, and they engage in noxious, horrible work. Ugra karma. Ugra karma means nasty activities. Kshayaya jagato hita. Activities that are meant to bring about destruction. Srila Prabhupada says in one purport, Srimad Bhagavatam, I believe, the asuras, the demons are called the asuras. The asuras want to enjoy a life of sense gratification, even at the cost of others' happiness. You can go to hell as long as I can squeeze some sense gratification out of you. I can get some enjoyment at your expense, that's fine. They want to enjoy a life of sense gratification, even at the cost of others' happiness. In order to fulfill this ambition, the asuras, especially atheistic kings or state executive heads, try to equip themselves with all kinds of deadly weapons to bring about a war in a peaceful society. So Srila Prabhupada locates this demonic mentality not exclusively, but finds it very much present in heads of state who are prepared to, we just cause the small scale demons just bring about trouble for others, but the larger demons bring about wars and just for sense gratification. On this plea or that plea, they'll create a war just for their own self-aggrandizement. They have no ambition other than personal aggrandizement, and thus Mother Earth feels overburdened by such undue increases of military strength. This is all demonic. Well, then we get to the events of 9/11, which in my original presentation goes through it in some, well, discusses in some detail. I'm going to skip most of this because it's such ancient stuff now, and because I don't really want to waste time talking about it. The summary of it is that one could make an excellent case for the assertion that, if you would perhaps make a path between here and the forum, so that if more people want to come or go, they can. One could make a strong case for the assertion that the attacks on the Pentagon and the World Trade Center, rather than being the nefarious deeds of Saudi and Afghani terrorists, were self-inflicted wounds brought about by forces within the United States government to provide a pretext for various demonic activities that ensued. I could walk you through my reasoning for this and offer you pretty hard evidence, actually, that this is true. Physical evidence, just ordinary stuff that, if you give it a patient hearing, might seem fairly persuasive. But rather than do that, you can find, by the way, some articles on this on my website, jswami.info. It's not going to walk you through all the gory details of that reasoning, but it'll give you a sense of the thing. But I've changed the question 25 years later. The question now is not, did they inflict these wounds upon themselves, but would they? I've recast the question in part because it's much easier to answer, and because, well, we really don't have to undertake the analysis anyway. It's not worth our spiritually valuable time. But did they? We could debate, we could spend time sifting through not even a lot of evidence that I think you can reach a conclusion fairly quickly. But perhaps not, because I've made the point elsewhere that we can't believe that our leaders would do such a thing. It's just inconceivable. As an American, I grew up with the conviction that America's really, despite all the, nasty things that our leaders do and all the arrogance and everything, deep down, we're a noble country. We're the ones who opposed Hitler in the Second World War and came to the aid of Britain, and we stand for good, and we don't do those things. It's people like the Russians and the Chinese, they'll do anything, but America's, we do a little mischief here and there, but we're a force for good, we're a force for democracy. And so they couldn't possibly, they couldn't have done this. That can be a difficult mindset to overcome, even for those who are inclined to believe that politicians are all liars and thieves and so on. It's just, too much to swallow. Even though the evidence might argue strongly to the contrary. But we can save ourselves that exercise, again, by just changing the question from did they to would they. And from Bhagavad Gita, that question is already settled. They most certainly would. For their sense gratification, Srila Prabhupada said, they'll do anything. He once said that. For their sense gratification, they'll do anything. So would they? Yes, they would. Did they? If you want to invest the time, you can look through that. Your time might be better spent elsewhere. But would demonic people do such things? Yes, they would. And with that sort of summary, I'm almost attracted to run you through a few, run a few facts past you, but maybe better not to. It's just not. I said we were going to save ourselves from all that, so maybe I should stay true to that promise. If there's anything you want to ask me, you can. But let's skip it. Then in my this is very interesting. Well, this is not a particular, but this is a quotation from Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was the security advisor to our long forgotten President Carter. The pursuit of power is not a goal that commands popular passion. In other words, your voters are not going to vote yes to, we want to pursue power. The pursuit of power is not a goal that commands popular passion, except in conditions of a sudden threat or challenge to the public's sense of domestic well-being. In other words, if we feel we're being threatened at home, we'll call out the troops and do anything. And that gives you a sense of perhaps the why they would, whether they did or not. Again, I said if I could weigh in on it. And then there's sort of support of that same idea that people don't really want to vote for power grabbing, but for domestic protection, they'll call out the troops. Of course, the people don't want war, but they can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That's easy. All you have to do is tell them they're being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same way in any country. That's Hermann Goering, 18th April 1946. So Srila Prabhupada said the Asuras want to enjoy a life of sense gratification, even at the cost of others' happiness. They try to equip themselves with all kinds of deadly weapons to bring about a war in a peaceful society. They have no ambition other than personal aggrandizement, and thus Mother Earth feels overburdened by such undue increases of military strength. I then, in my old presentation, discussed, what do we do about such things if we are persuaded that this kind of treachery is going on? What do we do? And the argument is that there's nothing you can do. Your political action will be ineffective. But what happens historically is that empires come and go. And so we had the Babylonian Empire, the Egyptian Empire, an Assyrian Empire, Chinese empires, the Roman Empire, Byzantine, Mongol, Ottoman Empire. How's your history? You know all these empires? That's because they come and go. They come and they're very important. They dominate the world, and then they disappear. The Jayadvaita Empire, Aztec Empire, Inca Empire, Spanish Empire, Portuguese, Mughal, Dutch, Austro-Hungarian. Austro-Hungarian, British, Nazi, Soviet, American. From the point of view of cosmic time, all these empires last hardly 3 seconds. So I argue therefore that to have meaning, changes have to take us beyond the limits of the material world. Just your political action, your revolution, your social activism and all of that will be, in the ultimate sense, inconsequential. But we should know what sort of world we're living in, what it's really about, not be fooled into thinking that this is just a world full of lovely people, that our leaders are the finest of men. There was an old song back in the 1960s, our leaders are the finest men, and so we elect them again and again. should know what sort of world we're living in, what kind of leaders we're talking about. We should stand with those who are godly, not with those who are demonic. And finally, we should get out of this material world and help others get out. Which means that we should chant Hare Krishna, distribute these books of transcendental knowledge, and spread Krishna consciousness everywhere. And that's where I leave it. And I wonder what kind of questions you might like to ask about the divine and demonic natures and so on. Yes?
Krishna Maharaj, you mentioned that there's all these different empires.
Do we have two microphones or just one? Sounds like there's two, the second one's far away. So you can just speak loud, if you would, keeping in mind that I'm half deaf.
You mentioned that we have various empires that have come and gone, and from a cosmic perspective, it's a minute amount of time. From a human time perspective, you seem to repeat the same thing. Maybe we call them different things, but it's essentially the same. Why is that?
Why is that?
Why do you think that happens?
These empires come and go, and they just last a few moments, but they seem to be just repetitions of the same thing. Why does that happen?
Yes, Maharaj.
On account of the contaminated nature of this material world, and because and especially because of the influence of the age of Kali. In Satya Yuga, we didn't have this. People were more than 75% godly, close to 100%. But as the ages move on and decline grows, we get increasingly a world dominated by passion and ignorance. And when passion and ignorance are prominent, these demonic qualities are what we see. We see intoxicants as a way of life. We see gambling hugely. I just came from South Africa a few weeks ago. And since my last visit there, the year before, just hoardings have come up everywhere for betting. Because not just casinos, although casinos all over the place, but online betting and corner shop betting, and betting on everything, not just on the outcome of an event, but you can bet on the constituents, the pieces of an event. You can just bet and gamble like anything. And this is being promoted hugely in South Africa, where my guess is that the poorest people are the people who are not poorest, but generally poor people are spending money, because what smart rich person would throw away money on this stuff? But hugely growing. And of course we do see it here in the UK also quite a bit, and it is growing, including gambling, of course, state sponsored by the state itself, which doesn't want to lose the available revenue. So gambling, intoxicants, meat eating, and illicit sex become increasingly just a way of life. And so the whole atmosphere becomes noxious, polluted, nasty. And in that nasty atmosphere, this is what we can expect, one demonic regime after another, competing to squeeze the life out of people and enjoy at the expense of others. It's the nature of Kali Yuga. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj,
Hare
thank you
Krishna.
so much for your class. I think in the beginning of your class you mentioned you had some reflections on that chapter before the 9/11 and after the 9/11 attack.
Yes.
And I was just thinking about that while you were speaking. I think for me is, one is a reflection and then it will lead on to a question, is to understand that we are, from what you're telling us, that we're surrounded by these individuals of demoniac nature.
Yes, that we're surrounded by these demonic individuals. I have a sort of well, just to illustrate, every year we have Nrsimha Chaturdashi, and we'll usually do a drama, and our Hiranyakashipu, Mr. Hiranyakashipu comes there. Hiranyakashipu will be there, and he'll be sort of our typical stereotype demon, as I mentioned before. Ah ha ha ha! Prahlad. Here's my Hiranyakashipu. When I direct the play, he'll be dressed in pinstripes, your typical banker's outfit. He'll be a sophisticated gentleman. He'll pick up the phone and he'll say, "Charles, we're having a problem with Prabhupada." "Yes, Charles." "Thank you, Charles." That will be my Hiranyakashipu. The one you see in the play, you never see anywhere. You walk down Regent Street, you're not going to see, the modern Hiranyakashipu going. But if you could see what was going on in the office buildings, in the political centers of power, in the financial, what should we say, financial centers of the centers of financial life, you would meet these people. I happened to attend a lecture at Princeton University by a former head of the Central Intelligence Agency who just did that to a T. He was suave, he was well educated, he was extremely well spoken, affable, and thoroughly demonic. Yes, they are all around us. Divine, there are people of divine nature. Vibhuta Sargalokesmin Daivasura. Vishnu Bhakti Smita Daivasura Stadvikari. There are two kinds of people in this world, the divine and the demonic. The divine are Vishnu Bhaktas, devotees of God. And Asuras Tadvipari, the demonic are just the opposite. Yes, Ma.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
I'm reading Bhagavatam and
You're reading Bhagavatam,
yes,
and there's a now the microphone is ready to meet you,
And in there,
just in time. But you have to hold it close, I think.
yeah, and in there I find in many cases the demigods who are supposed to be Vishnu Bhaktas,
Mm.
specifically Indra,
Mhm.
he's behaving demoniacally,
Mm.
and we have the demons who are devotees, like Vritrasura to be specific.
Mm.
Vritrasura to be.
Ah, yeah.
And again, we have it in the 10th canto as well, during the Govardhan Leela as well. So,
But it's unconstitutional for them. But go ahead with your question. I
yeah,
don't-
so even as, like, obviously, I'm definitely not close to Indra, obviously, but trying to be Vaishnava, what kind of contamination should we ourselves, trying to be Vaishnavas, guard against?
Pride, all these contaminations mentioned, Dambho, Darpo, Vimanascha, what kind of contamination should we avoid as Vaishnavas so that we don't behave in demonic fashion? Dambho, Darpo, Vimanascha, pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, Krodha Parusha, the sense of one's own greatness, ignorance, these things. Or we should cultivate the divine qualities, but really, what is that? Yes, Bhaktir Bhagavati Kinchana Sarvargunas Takshasanasate. If someone cultivates Krishna consciousness, all the divine qualities will naturally develop. Even Indra, if he does something demonic, it's not his usual mentality. He snaps back and thinks, oh, I messed up, and becomes humble. And whereas the demonic, to do something good is, what's the word? Just an occasional lapse for them. Even Kamsa, oh, I'm so sorry, I killed all of your children. I don't know what happened. I'll rot in hell for this for sure. And then, 2 days later, he's ready to kill every child born in the kingdom. So even if they show some good qualities, they're really in it for their own sense gratification. So even if there's some good quality that appears, it's unconstitutional. And the opposite, even if some demonic quality appears in a devotee, that's not usual for them. It disappears very quickly. The main thing then is to be a devotee, then all the good qualities will come. We don't have to separately have a campaign against gambling, against illicit sex, against abortion, against meat eating, against this, against that. We just have one campaign, chant Hare Krishna and become a devotee. Because then all the good qualities will develop, even if one is accustomed to half-killing animals like murgari or intoxication and all these other things that people formerly did before they became Krishna conscious. Once they become devotees, all of those things are automatically out of the picture.
If I ask a follow-on, in case of Hiranyakashipu, if we go back, rewind back, we see they were Jai Vijay. So, in some stage, everything is happening because of the Lord's desires.
Everything's happening because of the Lord's desire. Jai and Vijay were the original forms of Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. That's a special case.
Okay.
This is Krishna Leela. For some pastime, Jai and Vijay became demons. But that's like a play, like a drama. But then there are the perpetually conditioned souls whose demonic nature is that? Mudha Janmani Janmani. Mahamapapya Vakuntya Tadolante Brahmangatam. Again and again, they take birth in demonic life because they're of a demonic nature. Why? Because of their own choice, because of their own misuse of independence, not because Krishna wants to perform a lila with them, but because they're intent on these nasty activities. Yes?
Thank you, Maharaj. I have two questions, if I may. So the first question, I think a little bit like Kolakananda Prabhu was saying, just and how you said that living in this world we see this demoniac qualities even when we go to work, and I work in the legal sector and I've been in the financial sector, so I can definitely understand how do we guard ourselves as devotees from being, when you're around that energy all the time, how do we guard ourselves from that? And the second question is, how do we recognize in ourselves when those qualities are there?
How do we guard against these qualities when we're working with lawyers who are notorious for demonic dealings, for example? And how do we identify these qualities when they appear in ourselves? Well, as far as being in that kind of atmosphere, even if we're associating with these people, we avoid their association. We don't make our friendships with them. We don't buddy up to the demonic. We do our business, but we don't become intimate with them. The avoiding bad association doesn't mean that if the bus driver's not wearing tilak, you'll get off the bus. But it means that we don't associate closely with these people. For business, all right, we do our business and get out. Better if we don't have to associate with them at all. That's superior. Just like some devotees formed a Bhaktivedanta hospital in Bombay. So then everybody there is a devotee practically. And you have lovely association. And it could be a hospital, it could be a garage, it could be any occupation that you're in. If you're able to associate with devotees, that's wonderful. But if your occupation puts you into the company of more unsavory people, then we just do our business and get out. We don't make friends with them. How do we identify these qualities? Well, by introspection, and also we surround ourselves with devotees, and they may say, what got into you, and why did you do that? They'll, just like in the, it's just an example that comes to my mind, that if you're working in these, in virology, if you're working with superviruses, like to bring up another controversial world-touching event, if you're working with the COVID-19 virus or one of those, in some of those super viral research centers, they work with spacesuits, to protect themselves from the infection. And they work in pairs, so that if you and I are working together, I'm watching you to make sure that there's not a tear in your spacesuit or something like that. So similarly, the devotees surround themselves with devotees, so that if something's coming up, your real friends, those with whom you really do share intimate relationship, you reveal your mind, they reveal their mind. Say, what's gotten into you? Why are you doing this or that? They'll see it. They're our real friends. Okay. Something else? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for a very nice class. I have a question you mentioned about spreading Krishna consciousness. So, being, having demonic quality within ourselves and having people around same, how do we always be motivated, inspired to spread Krishna consciousness? me myself, I feel sometimes demotivated, and I feel like I just want to leave everything, go to Vrindavan, and just settle there. So how do we come out of this and always be constant in our, in our efforts in spreading Krishna consciousness?
How do we become constant in our efforts to spread Krishna consciousness? Sometimes we just want to go to Vrindavan and pack it all in and so on. Well, one answer is every now and then go to Vrindavan, pack it all in. And come back and with sort of renewed vigor for spreading Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, by immersion in Prabhupada's books, when you read Prabhupada's books, when we read them regularly or constantly, then we get greater and greater realization and greater desire to share with others. When you get something good, you want to share it. You know, if you found a medicine that works, or you found whatever machine that works, and it's really great, and you want to tell others about it. You want to tell others about it. So, by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, by chanting attentively, following the regular program of Krishna consciousness, and by associating with those who are keen to spread Krishna consciousness. We associate only with, Vaishnavas who are, happy with their routine. Then we'll be also Vaishnavas who are happy with our routine. But if we associate with devotees who are keen to spread Krishna consciousness, we become more keen.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Something else? Yes.
She wants to ask questions.
Hi, Krishna Maharaj. I just had one question in regards to initiation. Once we take initiation, we make our vows. So I was at the manor yesterday for Prabhupada's Sabira's Day, and a devotee was telling me how it's really important for us to protect our vows. And I'm a Swami disciple, so he makes us talk about how we have to vow to be in the mood of the servant. So what advice can you give on that particular vow, and how we can practice that more sincerely at all times in our life?
There's a vow to always be a servant of the servant.
To serve Srila Prabhupada's mission and to serve Guru in the mood of the servant. So how can we protect that vow and practice it on in day-to-day lives?
I don't really know, because it's sort of a sliding scale kind of a vow. No intoxicants, you either take intoxicants or you don't. No meat eating, you either eat meat or you don't. To be a servant of the servant of the servant, that's a matter of practice in one sense. Are we always 100% in the mood of being servants of the servants? Is that a vow we never break? It seems more like a matter of cultivation and development than a yes or no sort of a dyad. But again, by chanting, by reading, by meditating on that instruction, by taking it seriously and so on, we try to cultivate, and by associating with those who have a similar mentality, we try to cultivate that mood. Is that okay? You didn't have a question, first question. We're done. Yes. And maybe this can be the last question, unless someone has something really burning.
Hare Krishna. I was just thinking about how Kali resides where gold is, and in these financial institutions, which I work in, and I'm sure many others do, is is it sort of a deterrent to work in such institutions, or are we kind of subject to that anyway because there's so much gold in London as a city, for example, that it's...
Yeah, London, the city of London in particular.
Yeah. It's kind of just a niggle in my mind thinking about that.
Well, there are, what can we say, places where this greed and arrogance and so on are concentrated, and they do get concentrated where huge amounts of money are trading hands. That's a fact. There's a lot that we could say about the concentration of wealth in a few hands and how much unimaginable wealth there is, and the extent of the deceit that goes on to keep that money and get more of it. The greed, as Bhagavad Gita says, insatiable. But what can we do? We accept some work and sadosham apinatyajay. Krishna says that sarvaramba idoshena tumena nirvivavata. Every work is covered by some fault, the way that fire is covered by smoke. So sometimes what can we do? We work in these demonic industries, demonic environments. If we can find alternative employment in more benign environments or more benign employers, lovely, yes, better. Otherwise, we do it, but we better dedicate what we earn for Krishna, because otherwise we're participating in evil, and we're responsible for our share of participation in propagating evil. The karma comes on our heads because we're working to get money, and then we spend the money to enjoy, and then the karma is ours. So if we're going to work there, then we we damn well better use that money for Krishna's service. Otherwise, be ready for the reactions. Because it really is filthy up there. These wars that are fought for democracy or for freedom or for liberation of some oppressed country or some oppressed people, or to prevent. In fact, this lecture, I'll just give you a little taste. This lecture that was given by a former CIA head, who, by the way, had this guy standing next to him all the time, who was built like a tank, dressed in his suit, and he's, yeah, no, he would be skinny compared to that. But he was speaking on Earth Day. It was Earth Day, and so he was giving a talk. The war in Afghanistan, if I remember, was going on, where America was fighting against, what was it? Iran and Afghanistan, and supposed weapons of mass destruction and their nuclear power plants, all fictional. All this was going on. So the gentleman was talking about Earth Day and how we have to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and go for more natural solutions, more in tune with the environment. He's giving that the old Al Gore kind of narrative, those who know the American politician. But his real text was how, because that was the assigned subject, but his real text was how we had to be vigilant and strong in dealing with totalitarian, theocratic fanatical, yet a few more adjectives, regimes. That was his real, in other words, why we should be beating the hell out of Afghanistan and Iran and so on, because they were fundamentalist, theocratic, anti-democratic, and so on and so on. And these were clearly just pretexts. You know, they've got resources that we want, and so we're going to beat up on them. And I could tell you more about that whole thing, but that's sort of enough. It's just, they've got it, we want it, and we're going to beat them up, that's all. And we'll sell the public a lie about it so that they'll think it's noble and warranted and so on. And we'll lie to them, basically. It's understood now with the so-called nuclear weapons program that Iraq had. It was non-existent. That didn't really matter. We got to do what we wanted to do. And good. And it's for these, billions and billions and billions of dollars. Not the small money. And just another sort of like insight. I was once visiting San something or other, one of those little pinpoint-sized states on the Côte d'Azur in southern France, which are the playgrounds of the rich, Monaco and that sort of area. I forget which one it was.
Saint-Tropez? Yeah.
One of them. And I needed to get to the airport to leave. And there's only one winding road that goes down the coast. And for me to get from where I was to the airport would have been too much. Time would not have allowed. So I needed to take a water taxi to get to the airport. We got into the taxi, we were going, and we passed like this enormous yacht. And we keep going, and then the next enormous yacht. And each one, the Timmingale yacht that could eat the smaller yachts, just one after another. And if you think about it, the cost of the yacht is nothing but the cost of the yacht, maintaining the yacht, keeping a crew available for the yacht, the parking for the yacht, the maintenance of the yacht. And you're going to go out, every now and then with your friends. But meanwhile, you're spending this huge amount of money for one of your toys. So how much money do you have? How much money do you have? Enormous amounts of money concentrated in a few hands. And what they'll do, it's just routine. The way one guy on the street corner treats another guy or swipes your cell phone or something like that. That's what goes on the street. But what goes on in the city of London at the higher, top office buildings, that's on a whole different level of greed and sophistication. And it fits Krishna's description. And we're the little guys. We're not going to knock them over. We're not going to wake the world up to how nasty these people are. For us to campaign against this fraud or that fraud, this invented threat or that invented threat, it's not within our power. But if you spread Krishna consciousness, that will do everything. We said we were going to end. The only other thing to do is talk about these two books. The red book, Vanity Karma, is a commentary on a biblical book. I think it's probably the first commentary on any book of the Bible from the point of view of Vedic literature. It's really a book for outreach. It's written with the assumption that the reader knows nothing about the Bible and nothing about the Bhagavad Gita. But it deals with deep philosophical issues raised in one very unusual biblical book. That's the Red Book. And by reading it, one gets an education in that one particular biblical text, which is really a philosophical text, which is what makes it so interesting and different. One gets an education in that, and one gets an education in Bhagavad Gita. So it's meant for general distribution. It's written in simple, non-technical language. It won a big award, so it must be a great book, and so on. The Red Book, Srila Prabhupada's Kirtan Standards, on the other hand, is meant for every devotee. Anyone who's chanting Hare Krishna, who's involved in Kirtan, which is the main thing we do, can take advantage of this book for becoming familiar with the instructions that Srila Prabhupada gave us about Kirtan, how he wanted us to do it, how he didn't want us to do it, how things are pronounced or mispronounced, how what our mood should be while chanting, what we should think of while chanting, what mantras are bogus, and many other such topics. There are quite a number of surprises in the book, because there are things that Prabhupada never told us to do that we learned from the day we joined. And then we assume that this is all what Prabhupada taught us, and we're sometimes shocked to find out that it has nothing to do with anything Prabhupada taught. So there's some myth busting and a lot of important instructions from Srila Prabhupada pulled together. And so this is a book meant for every devotee. And the Red Book will also be, you don't have to be an outsider to take interest in the Red Book. But they have two different purposes. So you're invited to take advantage. You can see Shamanand, and he takes cash, credit cards, conch shells, and what have you. All right? Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.